Hello, everyone, and welcome to a presentation on the review of ethical responsibilities held by the directors of nonprofit organizations. My name is Ramika Ferguson-Adderley, and this presentation is in response to the requirements of Education 6013, Leadership and Ethics, a part of the Doctoral of Education program at Southeastern University. For this particular case study, or this particular review of the case study, I'm going to look at an organization that I have named Church Women's Conference. This organization is a 37-plus-year-old organization that was created or organized by the women of a similar denomination. All of them came from the same church, even though not in the same location. They gathered together and they organized themselves. And the purpose of the organization that they composed was to spiritually empower women. And they did this annually through a women's conference that addressed the empowerment issues of that time. And I'm sure that you know that from the late 1970s to now, the empowerment issues for women have changed year over year. And so this organization got together, this group of women got together every year, and they decided that they would just empower women to handle life's issues, spiritual issues, and do it the best way they know how. Well, from the 1970s to 2010, they were not formally organized. They operated through their local congregations. They always had a pastor that operated as their covering, and so that particular church or that particular pastor would do all of their business for them. They had their own executive board, they had their own officers, but all of their financial matters were processed through the church that they aligned themselves with. In 2010, there was some reorganization that took place, and they formally organized. They received an EIN number, a federal identification number, and they received a 501c3 status, sales tax exemption status, all of the above. During that same reorganization period, however, there were also some new members that were added to the currently operating and functioning executive board. And so when we look at this organization, the ethical dilemma that we're going to review is the executive director's mismanagement of organization resources. The executive director from 2010 has misappropriated or misallocated more than $30,000 of the organization's funds, has used the organization's tax-exempt status for personal gain, and has allowed the organization's 501c3 status to be revoked. And what is even more telling for this particular organization is that all of these things are coming to light in 2015. It is my unfortunate task, however, to be the one that has been assisting in the uncovering of these particular issues. In May of this year, I agreed to sit on the board of the Church Women's Conference, and as I started to ask questions and dig into financial matters, these items were brought to the surface. And so for the past 9 months, if not more, the organization has been managing these ethical issues. As the executive board, there were some possible solutions that could have been taken. The first possible solution was or is spiritual restoration of the executive director. Second was a financial restitution. Third is a legal separation of the debt created. And finally, fourth dissolving the organization and just reorganizing. And just of an additional background on the Church Women's Conference, consider, or please keep in mind, that some of the board members on the board in 2015 are the same board members that were present from 1978 when the organization began. So here you have women who have poured in to an organization for almost 40 years, sitting around a table in a church, determining how is it that they're going to deal with these ethical issues. For some, it's brand new. For some, the solutions are unheard of. For some of them, they are just not quite sure where to go. So some of the decisions that have been made in the past 9 months regarding the behavior of the executive director. The first decision that was made was that spiritual restoration would be something that the board would pursue, not just for the benefit of the board, but for all those involved. The board decided to take the Galatians 6:1-3 stance, which is to bear the burdens of one another, to restore such an one. And so that is what the board, the first decision that the board unanimously agreed on, is that before any other solution or resolution is taken, that they will take the stance for spiritual restoration. I can tell you that that process was not easy, because there were a lot of some of the older generation of women had in their head what that should look like. And then you have some newer, younger women who had a thought on how that should look as well. But we're grateful that in a desire for restoration, that the Lord did provide wisdom on how that process was to take place. And so the decision was made for spiritual restoration, for financial restitution as a part of the due diligence process for the executive director. She did not deny any of her actions. And so after the process of spiritual restoration took place, there also was a plan put in place for financial restitution. And we took our cue or our lead from Luke 19, where Zacchaeus said that if he'd robbed anyone, that he would restore fourfold what had been taken. And so we have come up with a plan that is legally binding, signed by all parties, to restore, to bring financial restitution to the organization. The third decision that was made was that there would be an investigation on how is it that the organization can legally separate itself from the debt created. This is still in progress. This is with attorneys at this time to actually determine whether or not, because none of the actions taken were approved by the board, to see if there is any legal stance that we can take. The third decision was to dissolve the organization and reorganize. Again, this is being investigated to determine some legal steps that are needed. What has been determined is that the organization doesn't want to carry forward any of the negative stigma that may occur because of the actions of the executive director. And so it's very interesting how sometimes what can be viewed going forward when you are attached to a certain name, even if there's a total reorganization that has taken place. In the conclusion of this matter, there are so many things that one must consider, the board, an executive board must consider when bringing on a leader for a nonprofit organization. And as I discussed further in the paper that goes with this presentation, is that leaders are not, they're not born. I love John Maxwell when he talked about the fact that leaders aren't born. When he discussed how leaders must have influence in order to lead, and that how you must earn your right to influence others. He states that true leadership cannot be awarded or appointed or assigned, that it only comes from influence and that cannot be mandated, it must be earned. So when we consider those who want to lead nonprofit organizations, or any organization for that fact, we have to investigate the characteristic of the person. So many times, of course, the true characteristics of individuals don't surface until they are placed in a bind, as was found with this organization. But we must decipher the true characteristics of those who will lead organizations, because if not, that you will find yourself in the same situation as the Church Women Conference organization, at a place where you are having to dissolve yourself, start all over, or take other legal steps in order to be able to move forward appropriately. And the ethical issues that organizations face, I do believe they're not unique to nonprofit organizations, but they can be found in a multiplicity of organizations, in church organizations, in school organizations, in non-formal organizations and informal organizations. It is just up to those who have decided to join themselves with these organizations to ensure that those that lead have the highest level of ethical standards. And we go through a little bit more of that in the paper. And so I hope that you get an opportunity to, if only, review the paper, scan it, see if there are some pointers that I could definitely improve on. But this particular case study is real and still in progress. So if we stick around long enough, I can probably actually give you the final outcome. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you've enjoyed a little overview of the ethical responsibility of directors of nonprofit organizations. Thank you so much, and have a great day.